Ready? You're ready? Okay. We'll call our meeting back to order at 1:44 p.m. And our next item, we're going to take up our 11:30 timed item, 6.8, which is consideration Lake Area Planning Council APC presentation on the Regional Transportation Plan / Active Transportation Plan for the Lake County region. And Supervisor Pyska, do we have staff online? Or
I know I did not communicate with John about time-wise as far as our lunch break and us being approximately 2 hours behind schedule on his 11:30.
at this point, we're okay with pending that and taking up another item? Okay. Then we're going to end 6.8 and move to our 1 o'clock item, which is consideration of update regarding public guardian conservatee BB placement from social services. No one's here? Okay. So we'll go ahead and pen that one and move on to our 6:10.
I'm not sure if you're saying that right or if there's Nephili. I have to see the name. I always ask, if you're part of APC, please raise your hand. Yeah, Nephili. Yeah.
So that is APC.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to go back to our 6.8, 11:30 item, consideration of Lake Area Planning Council APC, presentation on the Regional Transportation Plan / Active Transportation Plan for the Lake County region, and we have staff online.
Hello. Sorry about that. Yes, I'm not Mithili. That's what comes up on my Zoom feed. I'm John Spica. I'm the Senior Transportation Planner with the Lake Area Planning Council. And I'm sorry for the mix-up. I was trying to get myself on there. I will actually change this just to save any confusion.
And while Mr. Spica is doing that, so the APC collects funding from the federal, the state, and local jurisdictions. We do long-term, long-range planning for increased safety on our roads throughout the entire county. And then that's the regional transportation plan. And then the active transportation plan is like the multiple modalities, so that walking paths, bike paths, so that all kinds of different ways of going around on our infrastructure roads is possible. Part of the ATP, we just approved the multi-use path over in Middletown, so that's what part of those funds were used just recently, and just those are the types of things that we're looking at, and we're looking to get an update on both those plans.
Yes, thank you for that, Supervisor Sabatier. Not sure, can you see my screen shared?
Yes.
Okay, great. It's a fairly quick presentation. Mainly, we're trying to get the word out that we are updating our regional transportation plan and active transportation plan. Again, my name is John Spica. I'm the Senior Transportation Planner for the Lake Area Planning Council. And thank the chair and the board for allowing me to present today. We are kind of giving this update roadshow, so to speak, before the Board of Supervisors, and I'm going before several of the advisory councils and town halls in the next couple of weeks to get the same kind of message across. But just the brief PowerPoint, I wanted to talk about. First, who we are, and it sounds like Bruno kind of already went over this. We're the Regional Transportation Planning Agency for the Lake County region. Our board is made up of locally elected officials, two county supervisors, and council members from each of the two cities who make up the region, and then there's two at-large members. We have primary advisory boards made up of a technical advisory committee, which is mainly public works and land use officials from each of the jurisdictions. And then also a social services transportation advisory council also advises. They are representatives of senior, disabled, and low-income residents and transportation services for those populations. There are some other more minor roles that the Lake APC plays, administering the call box program, emergency call box program on the highways. Also, the APC board serves as the Lake Transit Authority board as well. And again, as Supervisor Smatier mentioned, we allocate transportation funds to projects within the region. We work closely with the public works staff from each of the jurisdictions to try to help fund projects as needed for regional benefits. And one of the main things we do are prepare planning documents, and the biggest of those are the regional transportation plan, which gets updated once every 4 years. It's a 20-year planning document that basically covers all modes of transportation. I'll discuss that in a second. It's updated every 4 years, and 26 will be the next time it will be updated. We're looking towards February of 26, the last one being February of 22. And so the whole idea is to promote a safe and efficient transportation system with a variety of modes, as I mentioned. This could include state highways systems, local streets and roads for the motor vehicles. There's an active transportation component, which is basically non-motorized transportation, walking and bicycling. And there's a transit element, there's a tribal transportation element, and there's an aviation element. So anything you could think of that to get from point A to point B is basically what's covered in the regional transportation plan. And this is actually also an update of the active transportation plan. It's kind of part of the plan, of the regional plan. It's, like I mentioned, it's a mode that deals mainly with pedestrian and bicycle networks throughout the county or the region. And it's kind of its own standalone plan, as well as being the non-motorized element of the regional transportation plan. As it's its own plan, well, for funding purposes, there's a state active transportation program, and projects that are found within the active transportation plan are eligible for that type of funding. So we kind of had that separate plan. But like I said, since the last couple of updates for the regional transportation plan has become the non-motorized element of that plan. The different types of transportation modes I've already kind of touched on. The whole idea of the plan is to come up with the needs and priorities of the county when it comes to transportation issues, whether it's state highways or local roads, etc. And that's why it's so important for us to get the word out, and we do want as much public input as we can. So we only learn of the needs and the priorities of the region through this outreach effort. So basically from officials from each of the jurisdictions, as well as state and tribal governments and the public in general, we try to gather as much information as we can to come up with a set of projects that will kind of work for the county in the next 20 years over that time frame. obviously there's a budget limitations, so these priorities kind of have to take that into account. And our update, just kind of a brief outline. We're going to be gathering as much input as we can from the public for the next few months. And then we will have those priority needs kind of identified through that process. We will put the plan together, broken down by the several modes that I discussed a second ago. We'll come up with the environmental review document for public review, as well as a draft of this regional transportation plan that will be finished probably later in the fall. And we are looking to adopt in February, as I mentioned. And I promise brief, this is brief, and we will be going out and about to the public as much as we can. We have surveys and we have a kind of interactive mapping tool that we're trying to gather as much information as we can on. We want to know what the public has to say, is what their major concerns are and what kind of barriers that they have in their own communities, and you know what issues are most important to them. And so just to close, I mean, here's our website has links to the mapping tool and the survey that I talked about. There's a QR code for those who want to just kind of, you know, send it through their phone or whatnot, or technical savvy. The less technical savvy can always email or write letters to me at the Lake Area Planning Council, or and there's my email address as well. And there's also a physical address of our offices in Ukiah. So of course, the long and short of it is we are spreading the word as much as we can over the next couple months, and we are looking forward to the public participating and working with us and to get this plan together. And that's basically my brief PowerPoint. If I'd be happy to discuss any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you. I see Supervisor Sabatier has a comment or question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for bringing this up. I believe in the past you kind of went on a little roadshow with all the municipal advisory councils. Is that part of the plan this year? Or do you need to get in requests to make presentations at those meetings?
I have already contacted many of the folks that are able to do that. And so I have in the next, I don't know, this month and next month, I'm on most of the agendas for those meetings. In fact, tomorrow night, I'll be at the Big Valley Advisory Council giving the same presentation, and then the following night in Middletown. So I have a couple knocked off for this month at least, and then next month I will be on a few of those agendas as well.
Awesome, thank you.
Where in Middletown are you going to be?
It'll be the Middletown area town hall.
Okay, Matt.
So
okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other supervisor comments? Not seeing any, I'll go ahead and open it. Thank you for the presentation. I'll go ahead and open it up to the public for anyone in the room that may wish to speak. We have Director Ewing approaching.
All right, Lars Ewing, Public Services Director. John, I wanted to say thank you to you for presenting here, but starting this. Excuse me. There's a few things I just wanted to touch on. I look forward to working with you, John, on getting really the trails component of this emphasized. A few recommendations for that. We have the Konocti Regional Trails Master Plan that is a decade old or so, and the recently drafted Parks, Recreation, and Trails Master Plan that still needs to come back to your board for final adoption. But that does have certainly a lot of transportation-related trails components to it. I'd also suggest to John that a good opportunity for outreach would be through the Lake Recreation Agency, JPA. While, recreation, it may not, transportation is one word, recreation is another, but we can do both. And so I think it's an opportunity to include projects that may not be coming from a transportation world or coming from the public works world, but we can incorporate those, the correct projects into the active transportation plan. I'll just end by saying that the Konocti Regional Trails Master Plan was put together at a time when it had different plans that were referenced that are now dated and outdated. It used to have I think it was a regional bikeway plan, which I believe is now essentially the active transportation plan. I'm looking over at John like he knows where I'm looking, but it's just an opportunity to ensure that all the plans are jiving. So John, thank you, and board, I appreciate your support for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Ewing. Do we have any other members of the public in the room? Not seeing any. Johanna, is there any hands online? We have Betsy Kahn online. Betsy, you can go ahead and speak. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Specka. Of course, you know what I'm going to ask you about. I'm asking because these guys don't know what I'm going to ask you about. In your list of the issues that are involved, let me scroll back up here to my notes. You mentioned state highways, local roads, bicycles and pedestrians, public transit, and aviation. What you did not mention was the transportation needs of the disabled population. That's the large category. Of course, there are many subcategories. You did mention at one point something about maybe I'm confusing this with an earlier agenda item, something about the Department of Social Services being involved, I believe. And of course, they know in vast detail what we're talking about here. So I wonder if we could have some kind of a conversation, a Zoom meeting that you could bring those groups together, maybe with some of the senior center managers, Office of Emergency Services, I don't know, and we could have a conversation about how this plan could include those needs. Thank you very, very much for this. Of course, we love APC. It's just a great organization. Thanks so much.
Not a problem. Yes, just to briefly touch on, we talked about the Social Services Transportation Advisory Council as one of the primary advisory bodies to the Lake Area Planning Council. So we will be talking to them as well, actually there's a meeting coming up, I believe in 2 days, if I'm not mistaken, and we will be presenting this before them as well. Typically, some of these issues might fall under the transit element, or they're discussed in that element as far as transportation for those populations that you mentioned. But yes, thank you for bringing that up, and I'll make sure to take note.
Are there any other hands in Zoom? No other hands. I'll go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the board. And this was just an update, so I don't believe there's any action to take at this point. So with that, we'll go ahead and conclude that item. And next, I'll call our 6.9 1 p.m. item, consideration of update regarding public guardian conservatee BB placement. And we have our Social Services Director, Rachel Dillman Parsons, here with staff. Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, board. Microphone working?
I'm not sure it was on. Is it?
Light was
It's
on.
glowing. We can hear me. So it should be a quick couple agenda items here. For background purposes, BB is a conserved individual who was released directly from jail, and he is also a 290 registered sex offender. So although he has Medi-Cal, it has been difficult to find a placement for him, and we don't have any external funding sources beyond Medi-Cal to pay for his placement in a long-term care facility. So your board authorized patch funding for 6 months in the amount of $30,000 and requested quarterly updates. So I'm here to bring you a quarterly update. So we've been working on stabilizing his medical condition, and he is now stable, which should be making it easier to find a placement for him. My staff contacted over 90 facilities in the state of California and identified 39 of which are potentially suitable for his placement. He cannot be within 1 mile of a school, so anything within a mile of a school is off the list. Of those 39 facilities, they're contacting them weekly to see if they have an opening for him. As of yet, we have one facility where he started number 12 on the waiting list. That was in January, and as of February 3rd, he's moved up to 8. So our goal is to get him into a facility by May 1st. That movement is looking good. We are hopeful, and if we don't have that in place, we'll come back to your board with an update in April. Question?
Any questions from board members?
Okay.
No?
There's nothing comfortable about any of this, and unfortunately, we're also between a rock and a hard place, so I appreciate the update, but
Yeah.
felt the
not
need to
great.
express myself.
There's a lack of facilities statewide, that's for sure.
Thank you for the update with that. I'll go ahead and open it to the public for comment on this item. Is there anyone in the chamber that wishes to speak on this item? Not seeing any. Are there any hands online, Joanna? There's no public comment. I'll close the public comment portion and bring it back to the board. And this is just an update. We've received it, so we can move on to the next item.
All right, so our next item is an update regarding federal funding for the Area Agency on Aging. And I do have an advocacy letter that I will read so the public is aware of what it says, and I'll hand it out to you.
And Mr. Chair,
Thank you.
Yes.
if I may, just for clarification, that would be item 6.10.
Yes,
consideration.
I'll go ahead and state that item. To clarify, that's 6.10, 110 item, consideration of presentation regarding 2025 federal funding for the Area Agency on Aging of Lake and Mendocino counties. Thank
Well,
you.
I handed out all my copies. No, I didn't. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So, in summary, before I just jump to reading the letter, this is prior to the federal funding freeze back in December, when the continuing resolution for the federal budget was passed. It neglected to include the Older Americans Act, which funds the Area Agency on Aging. And so since December, we have been attempting to figure out how to make the Area Agency on Aging work without that funding, pending the March 15th deadline for the continuing resolution to expire. On March 15th, either the federal government will pass a new budget or continue the resolution. Hopefully they do one of the two. In the meantime, we're facing a shortfall of nearly $1 million. We have spoken with CDA, the California Department of Aging, and they have helped us identify state funding that can be used to continue the services, but that is not a great solution because that funding is usually handed to the senior centers to be used in more flexible ways. And instead, if we use it to continue the existing programs, they don't get that additional funding later, as well as if we use that state funding and federal funding is later approved, we can't use the federal funding to backfill. It's double dipping essentially. So if we touch the state stuff and then later federal is approved, we could only use it going forward. There's also a contracting process that would need to occur with our senior centers that will be lengthy and potentially delay payments to them. So we're waiting until the very last minute to decide if we have to go for the state funding in hopes that it resolves prior to that. But if not, we have notified the senior centers of what's going on, so they're aware. And just for your knowledge, the programs that the AAA funds include the Senior Center Meals Program, which includes Meals on Wheels. That is one of the most visible programs. Alzheimer's daycare, information and assistance, legal services, family caregiver support, Tai Chi, and also provides our long-term care ombudsman. In Lake County, we served over 221,271 meals in 2024, responded to 26,410 information and assistance calls in 2024. In Lake County, 18% of our adults live in poverty, and this also represents Mendocino County, Area Agency on Aging. So in Mendocino County, 17% of adults over 60 live in poverty, both exceed the state and national average. So that is why we are bringing to you for consideration a letter to encourage our representatives to engage in advocacy, and we're also bringing this before the Mendocino Board of Supervisors. So it reads, urgent call to action, reauthorize the Older Americans Act, OAA, return federal funding to the Area Agency on Aging of Lake and Mendocino County, AAA, to prevent irreparable harm to seniors. To Congressman Mike Thompson, Congressman Jared Huff, Senator Alex Padilla, and Senator Adam B. Schiff. We, name of entity, are writing to request immediate reauthorization of the Older Americans Act and the return of federal funding to the Area Agency on Aging of Lake and Mendocino counties. The suspension of these funds will cause irreparable damage to the most vulnerable seniors in our community living on fixed incomes, many of whom are veterans. Our seniors will be forced to make the hard choice between eating and living expenses without reauthorization of these funds. The federal continuing resolution passed on December 20th, 2024 did not include OAA reauthorization. Lake and Mendocino counties face a nearly $1 million shortfall to continue these services from January 1st through June 30th. Vital AAA services at risk. And then I recap the services that I just told you about. And then I recap the stats that I just told you about. If you would like to include any specific examples, testimony from seniors, there's space there. We urge you to act now to protect your senior constituents, reauthorize the Older Americans Act, and include funding for the Area Agency on Aging. We shared this letter also with senior centers and anyone else who is potentially interested in engaging in advocacy. Anything to add, Lisa?
One thing to be aware of is if the Older Americans Act is not reauthorized, I'm Lisa Faracco, Program Manager for the Area Agency on Aging, for those of you who may not know me. If the Older Americans Act is not reauthorized, about 60% of our budget is federally funded. So moving forward, we will only have state funds to distribute to our senior centers. It will be a big impact on our budget. And some of our programs are strictly federal funding. They don't receive state funding at all. And that is the information and assistance, the Alzheimer's daycare, legal services, which is heavily utilized, family caregiver support, and Tai Chi. So your advocacy is appreciated.
Thank you. Supervisor Pyska?
Sorry. Yes. Sorry, Sam. Yeah, we've had several conversations with this, about this with AAA. It's very disheartening. So many of our seniors rely on these services. Lisa mentioned the legal services. We have seniors under attack for fraud right now. And, you know, the calls that people are getting, the baiting, the phishing, like all those scams that are impacting our seniors, we have legal services provided. And that's a lifeline to them when they have questions, if they're not sure if something's real or not, or if they're being taken advantage of. This is a really vulnerable population. And I don't think you mentioned your staff time is also covered by this.
Yes, our administrative staff time is also covered by this. None of my staff need to be worried about losing their job. I have plenty other things to do at social services, but yes, there would be less staff to dedicate to the services to our seniors, including long-term care ombudsman. She has managed to recruit several volunteers, which is wonderful, but she does a lot of work herself that would be at risk.
Yeah. So it's really important. We have higher levels of senior population. Our senior population is higher than so many other counties. I think we're at 26%. 27%.
I quoted the in poverty, not the total amount
Right.
who are considered aged, but.
Right, but the senior centers are also a place where people gather and they get that social interaction, they get out of their homes. So there's a lot here that we really need to support our seniors. I have had a conversation with Congressman Thompson and Luca about this, so the next step is for all of us to be advocating with these support letters, and the Mendocino Board should probably follow suit too.
And if I might add, the Meals on Wheels program is the only social interaction that many of our seniors get. We had a situation at one of the senior centers recently where their Meals on Wheels driver noticed that the person didn't come to the door. So they called the senior center contacted them. The person had fallen in their home and could not get to the door. And so they were able to send help to help that person because that Meals on Wheels worker had been out there and the contact wasn't made.
Yeah. And a lot of those drivers are volunteers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Supervisor Owen?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, with this being so important, how did it get missed and not put on the request in December?
It was part of the original federal continuing resolution, and it's part of what was cut in the final deal that was made.
Prior to December?
Back in December. So we're talking the federal budget process, and instead of agreeing on a budget, they agreed to a continuing resolution. Original proposed continuing resolution did include this. Many things were cut out of that before both parties agreed to a final continuing resolution, and this is part of what they left out.
Oh, dang.
I don't know why.
Okay,
I couldn't begin to guess.
okay.
It's not a good outcome.
Supervisor Sabatier?
Not a good situation, and don't even know what the answer is if nothing changes at the federal level. And to be honest, I'm not expecting much to change, as I'm hearing the minority party is looking to change their position and try to block new budgets in order to stop the things that have been happening currently, which means we're involved in a game where it has real impacts here for our seniors, and that really sucks. But I guess my main point for this is you have a letter here, you're asking for us to advocate. I'm not sure that we can approve a letter today with the way the agenda is written. Are you asking us to do this on our own? Does this need to come back next week so that we can still get it in front of them by March? I just want to kind of check in and make sure what do we want from here today and what can be done today.
If I may, Supervisor Badger, Mr.
Yes.
Chair. If one option for your board is to direct staff to come back with a finalized letter of support, because I do see some highlighted portions here that may need to be substantively filled out for your board's consideration if that is what staff is recommending as far as an actual letter of support that would come from the county, signed by the chair, to go out to these recipients or addressees.
Okay, I can totally do that. We're coming before the Board of Supervisors in Mendocino in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So my concern with that is that fit the timeline of, see, this is pretty important. We don't have a meeting next week. So our meeting after that would be another week out, so,
It's the same day as the Mendo Board of Supes. They chose to put it on consent agenda,
okay.
so I don't know that it will take up much time. They said I could speak during the 3-minute public comment.
Which we could do the same on the following, after the last week of February.
Okay.
And the other, in looking at the recommended action, it seems like we can just have consensus to make sure that we're advocating with our lobbyists on this issue. Is that,
Well, we did talk with the lobbyists about this and during the governance meeting, and they are tracking it, and we did reference this as it's under one of the priorities, sort of as a
So it's already
sub-priority. So they're
sufficient.
working on it. I think we just bring the letter back and we can put it on consent for next time.
Sounds good.
so, yes, go ahead, Supervisor.
I was thinking the exact same thing. I know we talked about it, but I didn't have it's under Protecting County Administered Safety Net Programs. So it definitely is already within the confines.
Yeah, but we specifically talked about it, and Rachel did a presentation, if you remember.
So then we have consensus to bring it back for our next meeting on consent, I think, to finalize the letter or approve the letter.
Sounds
Yes?
good.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Now I haven't opened public comment yet. I believe we're done with supervisor comments. And is there anybody in the chambers who would wish to speak on this item? Not seeing any. Johanna, do we have any in Zoom? Okay. No hands? So I'm going to go ahead and close public. Hang on.
There's a hand.
Then Betsy Kahn, go ahead and speak, Betsy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to say that I understand that every one of you deeply appreciates the reality that all this is about. I don't doubt your awareness and concern for 1 minute. I do want to say, for the sake of informing the public and making sure that this is clearly understood, the existing services, the ones that were already in place before this cut, are so meager. The waiting list to get that legal services is so long. Getting activism on the part of disabled assistance programs, you can wait 2 years. These are meager programs to begin with. I would urge you all, in addition to just lobbying and that sort of thing, to really take up the subject of the situation for the 20,000 older adults in this county, according to the World Census, accessed online yesterday. 20,000 adults in Lake County, of which this 27% are the what you consider to be the population, but so many of those are living not just at the federal poverty line, but within the nearest range of eligibility for food stamps, for example. We really have a serious problem here, and thank you for letting me advocate to you on behalf of everyone of our age group.
Thank you, Betsy. Are there any other hands, Johanna? There's no other public comment. I'll go ahead. I'll go ahead and close public comment, bring it back to the board, for which I believe we already have consensus.
Yeah.
So there's, what's that? You have, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see your.
No worries. I just wanted to kind of check in. I know there's a AAA board. If things go awry for March 15th and things keep going as is, and you're telling us that we can figure out how to handle things through June 30th.
Yes.
Is it going to go through the AAA board as far as what the need is and what the ask is, and then it comes to the Board of Supervisors? At what point do we engage? Because obviously the AAA board is going to be with their hands out, not being able to find money in the couch,
We're
basically.
funded with state funds through June 30th, and the board has already discussed the plan to put that in motion, what the strategy should be. So we're good through June 30th, and then who knows what'll happen July 1st, depending on state and federal funding. You want to speak to that more?
So CDA has let us know that they're approving invoices, California Department of Aging, on a month-by-month basis, depending on which area agencies on aging have requested prioritization. We have requested and are receiving prioritization for funding. Once we hit the March deadline, if there's not further federal funding forthcoming, we'll switch to the state funding buckets that we can utilize for this, the area plan contracts that we have in place. So the senior centers, through the contractors, will receive the funding they are expecting to receive through June. After June, when we would do our new area plan contracts, that's when we will see the real impact if we don't have federal funding. available. At that point, we will engage with our governing board prior to that point. Our governing board to ask their recommendation, and then depending on what our governing board decides for us, we will approach the counties with whatever the ask may be at that point.
There is a contracting process with shifting from the federal to state funds as well that you may hear of from the senior centers, because it will potentially delay the county out of.
Yeah, so the senior centers, they operate on a reimbursement basis with the Area Agency on Aging. They receive their contracts, so they have a set amount they're expecting to receive for the year. They provide us with their invoices and their backup, and then we pay. We're paying December now and this month. So if there is a delay, which we expect there may be in March, when they submit those March invoices, they may be up to 2 months delayed outside of the normal process while we execute new contracts to use the state funding. So you may hear from your constituents that funding is delayed, and it will be a hardship for the senior centers who do not have a lot of other funding sources.
And then there's also the May revision of the governor's budget will be an important one to better understand how that will have an effect. So, thank you.
But we do have to pay for the ombudsman no matter what.
Supervisor Owen?
Do we know approximately what they run per month? The senior centers, their budget, what do they normally collectively throughout the county?
We don't provide all of the funding. We're a single funding source. We're not the only funding source for the senior centers, so I can't speak to their total budgets. The Area Agency on Aging area plan funding, which is just one of our funding cycles that we have, is approximately $1.8 million for the 2024 fiscal year for Lake and Mendocino counties. And
Okay.
about 60% of that is federal funding.
Okay.
When we asked about meals per month, if we could figure out just a way to cover the meals, wasn't it $80,000 or $90,000 a month?
Yes, if we're just covering meals, so that will leave those programs that are strictly federal funded with no funding at all if you're only covering meals. Yes, it was about somewhere between $80,000 or $90,000 to cover just the meal portions of the area plan contracts that we currently have in place.
Per month.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe we have consensus on that item. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we're going to move on to our last regular item, 611. It was a 1:30 item for consideration, tentative approval of annual cost of National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA Weather Radio, NWR on Mount St. Helena. This item from Supervisor Owen and Sabatier. Sabatier?
Yes. So Supervisor Owen and myself met with Chief Wink, with the city manager of the city of Clear Lake. It had been brought to his attention during the last Boyles fire of some of the issues with the broadcasting of that radio tower to the South Shore area. I know in speaking with different folks, I'm getting different feedback from what our conversation, it was all the way through to Clear Lake Oaks, from the Cobb and Middletown area all the way through to Clear Lake Oaks. While in speaking with Lake County Fire Protection District, less so with the Clear Lake area. But either way, there's a large area of South Lake County that is not covered. If all other levels of communication goes away, these towers would have a capability to continue for our first responders to be able to communicate, also collect weather information, which we don't have in that area. I'm learning as I go. For this specific topic, I know that Middletown Rancheria had obtained a grant that would have paid for the equipment in the first 3 years of rent. The rent would be renting the infrastructure that already exists on top of Mount St. Helena, which our sheriff also rents out for some of their other communication. And it would have cost about $16,000 per year, and that grant funding would have covered the equipment in the first 3 years. What was asked was who's paying for it afterwards. The grant from what I understand, did not allow us to use the grant until there was a better commitment for the future costs of the rental. And there was, we were unable to find, or those involved in the conversation were unable to find where the continued funding would come from. So today, I am looking to see if we can, I didn't want to re-engage with our federal partners, Mike Thompson's office, Congressman Thompson, CAL FIRE, and others to, again, bring this back to us without having some sort of commitment that we're interested in making this cross the finish line. That doesn't mean that we want to pay 100% of the entire cost. That doesn't mean that we don't want to negotiate, but at least that there is interest to ensure that we have redundancy in our ability for first responder communication to be continued during extreme events, disasters, and so on. And so today, just looking for that, what did I call it, tentative commitment, in the sense that we don't know what the final cost is, we don't know who might be paying for it, but to reopen those conversations with the idea that we do want to cross the finish line and we do want to make this happen, to make sure that we don't end up in a place where we are unable to communicate during our most sensitive and vulnerable of times.
Yes.
Go ahead, Supervisor Ron.
While we were looking into it, it sounded like we may be able to get some kind of discount on that as well. That was mentioned while we were in communications on the rental space down, less than 16,000. We're hoping to be able to negotiate something a little less. And then it sounded like we had, I think, was it South Lake County Fire or somebody along those lines might be pitching in on a portion of that, we're hoping. And I was also still concerned about some areas like out Morgan Valley that might still have dead zones, and we checked into it. And if that does occur, we can add to this tower as well to have it, to be able to cover some dead, if there's still some dead zones in some areas.
And real quick, I do believe that, I can't see Zoom, but I believe that Chief Paul Duncan and our OES, Leah Stottle, is available as well to respond or add to the conversation. If you could, please.
Okay, first Supervisor
Yeah.
Pyska is.
This is something that I've been talking with Chief Wink for years on, and I don't disagree that we need this coverage. I am not sure that this is the best, I don't know if the county's the best entity to be taking this over. I feel like this is NOAA equipment, this is a NOAA broadcast. They cover all the other equipments and towers, even coming into our county. I'm sure Mendocino County doesn't pay for it. So I'm okay with having the conversation, and maybe this is something that we take to the disaster council, but I'm not okay with just saying that we're gonna pay for it right now. I feel like there's ways for us to engage with Congressman Thompson and get this in NOAA's budget, because this is their responsibility. This is not our equipment. This is not our broadcast. This really is nothing, but we identify the need and go from there. And I did get an email from Leah, and I think there are some changes in technology that are coming too, so it may not be good for us to, first of all, we'd have to reapply for grants, and there are FEMA grants open because of the LA fires for all of California. We're not quite sure what that looks like right now because a press release disappeared off the FEMA website.
It's happening these days.
Yes, so we're not exactly sure when that's open or not, but she has started conversations with Cal OES about that. But it looks like there's some changes in technology. If we're paying for it, are we responsible for the maintenance? There's a lot of questions there. So I would just really prefer to have this all under NOAA. And it could be that this happened, it could be we're in this situation because of the change from being with the Sacramento Weather Service and now we're in Eureka. And so maybe we need to engage Eureka to figure out who pays for all of those towers and the equipment. It says that they don't have other entities paying for this. which means it's got to be in their budget, which means we need to just get that engagement happening with Congressman Thompson to increase their budget to cover it. So he's well aware of the need. This conversation is not a new conversation, it's old. I would just suggest maybe we take a deeper dive into this at the Disaster Council, but in the meantime, have our local OES looking at some of these other options.
And I do not disagree with your comments. If there's new technology, and we need to negotiate for what's the best term in getting this accomplished. The facts of the matter is there are some dead zones in communication, and we need to look at trying to figure out how to fix that for future disasters. And again, don't disagree with anything that you just said.
Yeah, my comments on this, I was actually involved in my previous job when the Disaster Council was looking at, I don't know if it was exactly this project,
It was similar.
but it was very similar. Even got to the extent of radios that were purchased and handed out. And then I'm not sure exactly what happened from there. But I do have a lot of questions about the reach. I mean, do we have a map of where this reaches to? What are the dead zones? I think there's a lot more research to do with NWS up in Eureka. I know I regularly listen to the NOAA weather radio that is broadcast from Laughlin Ridge in Mendocino County that reaches the Lakeport area of our county. It was my understanding that that's their facility. They maintain it, they pay for it. So I think this is important. I think we need to be working on it. I think it's a resource we should have, but I think we need to do more follow-up investigation on all of these details and possible funding sources. If for some reason it's not NOAA, then maybe there's other sources that the OES can, or the county can access. So I think it's important. I want to work on it. I just think we need to do some more work before I'd be ready to say, agree to spend X number of dollars that I don't know if that's even in the range right now. So that's where I'm at right now.
Do you have information or a direction we should go to? Because I'm new. So can you point us in the right direction on where to get the information to do the research? I had asked about newer technology too when this was brought to me. However, the redundancy and something kind of low tech in case there is, some disruptions with the higher tech were a couple of things that were brought to my attention, and it's like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So if you have a direction that we should do some research in, anybody, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, well, what I recommend is, and we've got Leah on, I think we listen to what she's got to say, give her direction to look into this further. We have a disaster council meeting coming up in March and have a presentation there, and just because at disaster council, we're gonna have the cities represented as well as fire districts, county department heads, and the police,
Yeah,
both police
law
chiefs.
enforcement. It's a wide
And
range.
CHP. So it's a really appropriate conversation to have there, and then we can figure out next steps. What Vice Chair Rasmussen was talking about was under Sheriff Martin, there was talk about developing some kind of alert system like this, and there was public surveys that were done, and the public didn't want to spend money on it. So I'm really hesitant to locking us into something that could be indefinite, when we've got possibly some other ways that we can accomplish the same thing. So that's what I recommend those next steps to be.
So I think we have Leah on, and maybe we should get some thoughts from her at this point. Or Chief Duncan first. Chief, you want to go ahead and speak? Chief Duncan?
Absolutely. So I do support this, adding the radio up to Mount St. Helena. I think that would be huge for our area to get that coverage down in the South County and to those other areas of Clear Lake that are not covered currently. I did speak with Chief Wink regarding the NOAA funding, and they currently fund all their towers as it is, but there's no funds for expansion. So any expansion we need to do would be funded on our own or through another option. But for right now, I think the best thing is speak with Leah, see if we can obtain just a direct staff to get the costs and options for funding and whatever the newest radio technology. Sounds like they changed brands of radios, but it's going to be a similar cost. But have a staff report generated through OES that has the options that the county can pursue for funding, funding going forward, and the current technology needs of the site. But support the idea and the process.
Thank you, Chief. And Leah?
Good afternoon. I'm not sure I have too much to add to the conversation, but I did pull up the coverage maps from National Weather Service, and it looks like our gap is also a gap in the portion of Colusa and Yolo County. So maybe to add to the discussion is if there's anything that could partner with them. But certainly it's possible to take this to Disaster Council and look into it further and examine all the options that are available.
Leah, are you able to share your screen so we can see the coverage map?
Yes.
What was the other county besides Colusa?
Yolo and Colusa. Supervisor Sabate, do you want to comment now or wait until? Okay.
So I'll gently scroll out here so you can get a bigger picture of the state and kind of beyond. And then if you guys can see it okay? Yeah.
Yes.
Can you zoom back in?
Yep. So on the way in, I won't go too fast because it moves. You can get a better view too of the towers that are servicing what we already have for coverage and see that they're not really condensed here. But then, I don't know if you want in a little bit more, it jumps faster.
Is the white the non-covered?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's most of the city of Clear Lake too, so.
And I don't know if that represents, if we put something on Mount St. Helena, what the coverage would be. And I think that's what we also need to find out is what is the extent of a broadcast from that elevation with all the other slopes that might be in the way, even though I hear because it's low tech, the slopes aren't, it's kind of like AM radio versus FM radio.
Correct, and I think that that's possible to get a projected coverage area. Any further, Leah?
I think part of the discussion, if we were looking at the whole picture too, would be to maybe check out cell phone coverage and how that's evolved over the last 5 to 10 years. At the same time, this discussion has been kind of going on because some of the same technology or similar technology is, we can send out the WIAs. None of it's 100%, but it might be worthwhile, especially with the expense that we're looking at with this, just to kind of overlap it and see if maybe there's already enhanced coverage from the increase in cell phone towers that might kind of cover what we're looking for here, what we may get out of a tower. Just part of the discussion.
Thank you.
And I think before we have our meeting with the Disaster Council, we should have, do some outreach to Congressman Thompson's office too and figure out, maybe we just get the budget increased so that they can do their job with their equipment. I think that's the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
So put in a request to NOAA to,
Well, I think NOAA's saying they don't have the budget to increase, that they do this for every other
well,
tower
I
and
understand,
equipment.
but I meant we'd first ask them and then ask them to ask for an increase in their budget, or
No,
would we go to them?
We asked Congressman
Okay,
Thompson
to increase it.
because he can help get that federal
Thank
budget
you.
increased.
Yeah, I agree that's a good step, and I'm still in favor of having this in front of the disaster council to get more, also help get more public feedback, from the community. If
Sure.
it's discussed once we're ready.
But in the meantime, we could have Matthew do some outreach and find out,
Correct.
if that's something that can happen.
Supervisor?
I just got off the phone yesterday. I think it was yesterday that I spoke with Luca from Mike Thompson's office, so he's definitely aware that this topic is being discussed. In fact, he was already talking to me about the topic, and so definitely on their purview, has been for a while because of past conversations. I'm happy to pass this on to the Disaster Council. I think it has the two supervisors who are most impacted by the lack of coverage. And so I think any discussion that leads to a solution, no matter what that looks like, that way we can either get options brought back to us if we need to figure out what our role is, or if it gets done for us. But I definitely do not want this to drop with no solution. I think we need to keep pushing just to make sure that we can get that coverage. Oh, I did want to add one last thing. In all of the agencies that were listed, I'm not certain if Middletown Rancheria is part of the Disaster Council, but I definitely want to re-invite them into the conversation because they had already had access to grants to help out. And I think that they are just as impacted as our county unincorporated jurisdictions in the lack of coverage. So I think that their voice and their participation is necessary.
Now, tribes aren't part of the disaster council currently, but we will bring them into the loop.
Mr. Carter?
And Matthew Rothstein brought to my attention that we're also in talks with Congressman Thompson's office about community project funding for this, if available as well. So we're looking at other angles as they become available.
Can we get a 99-year lease?
I agree with Supervisor Sabate. I don't want it to drop. I just think we need to do some more work. So I'm good with doing that follow-up that was described. I think we have consensus on. Do we need a motion?
Did we do public?
Yeah.
I haven't done public comment yet.
Yeah, it can be done by consensus direction of staff.
Okay. Okay, at this point, with no further from the board, I'll open up to public comment. Is there anyone in the room who wishes to speak on this item? Seeing none, Johanna, do we have any hands on Zoom? Hang on a second. No hands on Zoom? Okay, I'll go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the board.
And
Anything further?
in looking at Johanna, I just want to make sure we're clear on our consensus. We're asking admin staff, Matthew Rothstein, to reach out to Congressman Thompson's office to start the conversation to see what's possible, and for requesting if Leah Sodelik can go ahead and organize a future disaster council where this is discussed and followed up on. Is that correct for the consensus?
Well, yeah, and if she could do some more investigation too before the disaster council.
Yes, put it on, or consider disaster council once we're ready with any of that other follow-up.
Okay. Just wanted to be clear. Thank you.
So I think we have consensus on that. And that concludes our regular board meeting, unless I've missed something, CAO? No? I believe we covered everything, so I'm going to go ahead and conclude the regular board meeting. And we do have a closed session item, which I will,
Does that mean potty break?
hang on, I got to notify of the closed session item. We're going to go into closed session at this point on our 8.2 item, which is conference with legal counsel, existing litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9 D1-FERC, project number 77, Potter Valley Hydroelectric Project. And we're on break until we reconvene.